Great, and we are now recording. So again, as I said, this is our first public learning session for Anchors in Resilient Communities USDA RFSP project. We are excited to share our agenda with you now. We're going to start off with an introduction about what is Anchors in Resilient Communities, for those of you who are not familiar. We're going to cover an overview of the RFSP project, and we're including timeline, deliverables, an overview of the first convening that we held, and next steps. And then there'll be a Q&A following the presentation. So we encourage you to think of questions as we're going along and share those in the Q&A function. If I could just see the next slide. Here's that agenda that I just covered. I want to introduce myself. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Poor. I'm a regional program manager with the Healthy Food and Healthcare team at Healthcare Without Harm. We are the co-conveners of Anchors in Resilient Communities with Emerald Cities Collaborative. And I'm joined on this webinar today by my Emerald Cities colleagues, Carly and Jen. And we're going to hear also from H. Nieto Friga from Supply Chain, who's our featured speaker today, and really looking forward to hearing from her. Next slide for just some housekeeping. Just so everyone knows, the webinar will be recorded and available on the ARC website. We'll share a little bit about ARC and the website on the next slide. As I mentioned, please use the Q&A function at any point in the conversation. We will have a Q&A after the presentation, but we'd love to see your questions coming in, and excited to hear what you are thinking as we're talking about this work. I'd love everyone to introduce themselves in the chat. You can put your name, your organization, and where you're calling in from. We'd love to see who is here. Looks like we've got a great group. I'm so happy to see some of the folks on this call. Thrilled you're here. And if you just go ahead and introduce yourselves, then you can all know who you are as well. And I think you should be able to use the chat. Yes, amazing. Claire, welcome. So happy to have you from CAF. Okay, here you are coming in. Great, thanks everybody. With that, I'm gonna pass it. Oh, actually, no, I'm gonna do the next slide, which is just a background about ARC. As you're introducing yourselves, I'll introduce ourselves. ARC stands for Anchors in Resilient Communities. We are a multi-sector community-based partnership that coordinates equity-centered regional projects and learning spaces to maximize the purchasing power and collective investment of the region's anchor institutions to improve health and generate wealth. As I mentioned, Emerald Cities Collaborative and Healthcare Without Harm convene the ARC table. And ARC, our vision is ARC leveraging the assets and capacities of Bay Area institutional anchors to target the social determinants of health and well-being, with a focus on expanding jobs, improving health outcomes, and community climate resilience. We are very centered in our engagement principles of equity and inclusion, transparency and accountability, long-term commitment, and shared governance, all of which we hope will get us to our large goal of systems transformation to build community health, community wealth, and climate resilience. One of the key functions of ARC is to provide co-learning opportunities to everyone in our network, and public learning sessions like the one we are on today is one of the key ways that we do that. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to Carly Yoro to introduce today's topic.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Hi, everyone. So now that you've heard a little bit more about what ARC does, I just wanted to highlight that one of ARC's primary projects is supporting an equitable and resilient food economy, and we do that through our Regional Food System Initiative. So some of the primary goals of that initiative include, aggregating institutional demand for local and sustainable food products, increasing community-owned food businesses, as well as increasing opportunities for local BIPOC producers who have historically been excluded from institutional markets. The way that we work on those values, on those goals, is through different approaches, one of which is one-on-one anchor procurement pilots, where we are working with institutions on sourcing value-added products and incorporating them into menus and different meal plans and options. And a lot of that is done through our regional coordination, which is led by our amazing food systems manager, Aishniato Friga, who is here today and who we'll hear from next to talk through ARC's Regional Food Systems Partnership Project that allows us to expand on these goals and, like Lauren mentioned, really work towards systems transformation. So with that, I will pass it on to each.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carly. So yeah, as we know in this food systems work, there's so much alphabet soup. So we're going to try to untangle all the acronyms and let you know all that we've been up to. And I see a lot of friends on the call today, but for those that don't know me, I'm Aishniato Friga, founder of Supply Change, and I've had the pleasure of working with ARC for I think almost 4 years now. And one of the benefits of working with them in this way is that as supply change, we see a lot out in the field and are part of building a ton of different supply chain pilots, linking BIPOC, underserved, and family farmers to institutions of all kinds. And then we get to bring that back to the Bay Area work with ARC, where we get to apply that as well with a ton of NorCal institutions. So we're seeing this basically as kind of like the next level of how to go deeper on really making meaningful market access happen for those types of producers. You can go next, Carly. So let's just center on the problem and kind of what this project is all about. Essentially, this is around the YOLO Food Hub Network, which some of you may be familiar with, kind of started in an earlier iteration as a more straightforward aggregation and distribution hub. But going back to what I was saying just a minute ago about going out in the field and seeing what the barriers are to institutional procurement, we've seen some really strong themes. So under the problem, you can see that corporate contracts and market consolidation around food service management companies and distribution, those types of arrangements really prevent individual underserved farmers and food hubs from selling to institutions. So that they're literal kind of walls that won't allow the increase of those types of sales, no matter how hard we try. We also see that inside the institutions, there's severe labor constraints, there's cost constraints, and those things all basically lead to a lot more purchasing of pre-cut and prefabricated items. So even if we were to get a local farmer who can sell carrots to a hospital, for instance, the hospital may not be able to take the full long form carrot with the green on top, right? That might need a whole bunch of carrot coins instead. However, in our Northern California landscape, there's really a huge void of that type of processing infrastructure that can handle that type of job, the types of quantities that we need to serve that institutional demand. We used to have Bay Cities Produce, which was kind of like the go-to regional distributor and processor, but since they shut down in the fall, now that void has become only bigger. The third part of the problem is, of course, that institutions really need stability and volume. You know, they really need to be able to depend on their suppliers. They need competitive pricing in order to, hit the tight price points in order to get food out on the plate in a cost-effective way. And increasingly, they really need clear reporting, right? For those that are signed on to GFPP, Jocelyn knows this very well, there's so much vendor and product research that you have to do because distributors do not use standard naming conventions. They do not use standard categorization conventions. So without third-party solutions to do that vendor and product research for you, all that burden goes on to public institutions. So publicly funded staff are essentially absorbing the externalities of that burden of research. So we have basically a problem of these corporate contracts and market consolidation, and we have a supply and demand problem, right? And how to coordinate it all. So where YOLO Food Hub Network comes in is like that we can think about consolidating back. If the problem is that larger distributors have kind of eaten up a lot of market share, it's not going to make sense to try to get individual food hubs like onboarded at each individual institution. It might make more sense to think about consolidating everybody's efforts around one central aggregation, processing, and distribution hub. So that's essentially the core concept here. So if we create a processing center that all food hubs can truck whole product into, and then pre-cut and prefabricated product comes out, we're essentially able to consolidate a values-based supply chain in a way that makes sense for institutional demand. We can develop products that solve the problems inside the institution. So we can create the types of pre-cuts, sauces, condiments, and more that are labor saves, while also meeting institutional sustainability goals. So we can hit local, organic, we can hit anything in the GFPP sustainability matrix. We can hit anything in the UC sustainability matrix. We can hit ASHI Stars 3.0. We can essentially customize product lines that meet the needs of institutions in a specific way. And then, of course, the way we have to do that is by coordinating production with local farmers so that we can stabilize those prices, stabilize volumes, get everybody on the same page around producing towards those product lines. So Carly, if you go next, we can go into this a little bit more. So just to ground it in a solid example, many of you have heard me use this pico de gallo problem, but several years ago, San Francisco Unified asked me if I could help develop a pico de gallo that was sourced from tomatoes from Sacramento, local farmers, and chiles and onions from the Central Coast. And we just weren't able to make that happen with the distribution and supply and processing voids that I've discussed. So under this new system, a grower in the Central Coast might sell her chiles and onions to the local food hub, which might be coastside local. That food hub would then deliver that product to the YOLO Food Processing Center. The YOLO Food Processing Center would then turn that into a pico de gallo, bringing in, again, tomatoes from a separate farmer. And then that becomes a product that any Northern California food hub can now sell. So that, I hope, explains the kind of consolidation and stabilization concept that we're going towards. So you can see on the right here, I included an image from Commonwealth Kitchen, which is another entity that Supply Chain is working with under a USDA grant. This is a type of supply chain that they've developed for Boston and New England. So they develop all kinds of pickles, condiments, sauces, salsas, and some pre-cuts as well for the institutional market for hospitals and universities and K-12 schools. So it's kind of a similar playbook that we're following here. So all this is to say, this is the concept that has been emerging, and this RFSP grant has helped outline how we're going to do some business planning around it, some convening, et cetera, et cetera. So we can go next, Carly. Just to frame up again and ground it in some real numbers. These are numbers just from UC San Francisco over an 18-month period from January 22 to April 24. So you can see these are all pre-cut items, and you can see the amount of spending that happens just within one institution. So across fruits, vegetables, and then a little breakdown of some specialty crops, you can see it's $3.1 million of spending on pre-cuts over an 18-month period. All that volume during that period until Bay Cities closed, you can see in the Bay Cities column, that's how much of that volume that they were handling. Now that Bay Cities is gone, all that volume has essentially shifted over to US Foods, which means that that's money that's going out of our community, that's not being spent on local and regional farmers, and that's being spent on farmers much further away that are much larger and corporatized. So that's essentially our opportunity. We want to take that spend back and put it in our regional economies and put it towards regional farmers so that they can stay farming and achieve financial health and wealth and stability. Just to give you a snapshot of what top items for pre-cuts and prefabs across the UC system are, you can see sliced tomatoes, onions, carrot coins, salad mix, grill blends, sliced mushroom, cucumber, and potato. Those are really strong spending items, spending categories across the entire system, both health and collegiate. And then for prefabricated, there's lots of tomato sauces, broth, stews, and salsas. So all things that we would want to develop products around with this project. We can go next. Okay, so here's an overview of our RFSP project and our current status within it. So looking at 2024 in particular, we hired our facilitation and business planning consultant FoodWorks group in January. They are incredible. One of the biggest projects they're known for is for doing some similar work on the East Coast with the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative, which is kind of centered around an amazing food hub called 4P Foods that many of you might have heard of, and essentially focus on getting BIPOC produce into institutional markets. So they've already been a huge asset in helping us center ourselves in this project, bringing in their expertise from other projects, et cetera. We've also engaged the Central Coast Food Hub that's emerging. One of the core concepts of this grant is that we will kind of use this food hub to processing hub, kind of like tester lane between the Central Coast Food Hub and the YOLO processing hub. and use that as a proof of concept so that we can build out other scenarios where other food hubs are engaged in that previous scenario that I described, where all the food hubs are feeding in and then taking out again. Earlier this year, we also completed an institutional assessment report. We updated an earlier ARC report from 2018, kind of outlining like, what does the landscape even look like between institutional demand, current supply for regional farmers, et cetera. So we updated that with some new core concepts that are informing our approach to this YOLO project. We also held our first convening in early May this year, which was super exciting, and I'll share some more details about that in a second. Right now, we are in learning session number 1, so you are here. And then also business planning led by FoodWorks Group, the consultant I mentioned, is underway now. So they're planning to finish that essentially by August, September to kick us into gear for convening number 2, which will be focused on farmers and food hubs. So convening 1 was on the operators who will be inside the building. I'll share more about that. Convening 2 is about supply, and then convening 3 will be about institutional partners. So looking ahead briefly to 2025, and we'll review this at the end as well. For February 2025 is when we'll have the second one of these learning sessions. In August of next year, we'll be geared up to do our real estate and financial assessments around the actual YOLO Food Network site. And then we'll also dial in on our fundraising strategy, both for the actual site build and then also for any other softer infrastructure that we might need. For September, we'll do convening number 3, again around institutional partners. And then October, the big goal is to secure institutional commitments, which is the ultimate goal for this entire project. We will be doing so much preparation around making sure that the workings of this business model will happen. But of course, success really hinges on institutions being willing to say, I will hit the order button, I will commit to this project, I will commit to these certain product lines that you will develop. So that's kind of like what our North Star is for this entire thing. We can go next. Cool. So I will share more about the amazing convening that we had in May. It was seriously so much fun to get everyone together. I feel like I'm blown away every time by in-person meetings being like, oh yeah, that is really, truly the best. So again, the focus for this was on the operators. What I mean by operators is for this entire project, we've secured, or others have secured, a 5-acre site in Yolo County that has a historic, beautiful barn on it that needs to be retrofitted. And there's a plan to build some new construction. And in that new construction building, that's where the processing magic will happen. So the 3 operators that we've identified for this project are Cape Valley Farm Shop, who is slated to do the aggregation and distribution. They already, as many of you know, have a long 15-year experience of being a successful food hub in Northern California, who has served all kinds of restaurants and schools and tech companies, et cetera. So they have a lot of expertise in terms of managing farmers, aggregation, distribution, relationship building, et cetera. The second operator is who will be doing pre-cuts and what we call prep. So that's Marcellus Foods. Pre-cuts are, of course, things that are chopped, sliced, diced. Preps are things that are chopped, sliced, diced, and then have a slight cook attached to them. So instead of just diced potatoes, for instance, you'd have diced parboiled potatoes. Instead of just chopped broccoli florets, you would have chopped, blanched broccoli florets. So there's some institutional demand, particularly from K-12 schools, for that type of product. And then Marcellus also has their own direct-to-consumer model so that they have kind of a hybrid margin strategy. So that makes their business more resilient. So Cape Valley Farm Shop is operator 1. Marcellus Foods is operator 2, doing pre-cuts. And then, oh my gosh, balloons, love it. The third operator is Matriarch Foods. Matriarch is an established food manufacturer that makes retail and food service products around sauces, condiments, broths, and purees that are upcycled from mid-scale farmers. So we think that they're an ideal partner for this project because of their deep expertise in product manufacturing. Also because they can take remnants from the pre-cut operation and turn those into veggie broths and stews and things like that. So that kind of rounds out the set. So we brought Cape Valley Farm Shop, Marcellus, and Matriarch together for this convening. And then we also had a slew of supporters. So we had, of course, ARC, myself from supply chain, Foodworks Group leading and facilitating the session, Valley Vision, and New Season CDC, who is the owner of the barn site, and then Kitchen Table Advisors. We can go next, Carly. So the main discussions and outcomes that we focused on, they were kind of in two main buckets. So one was, how will the interoperator relationships be structured? Is there a holding company? How will we govern ourselves in terms of what happens inside the building? What kind of legal structure options do we have? How will the site actually operate it? Who's responsible for managing it? And then how will financial flows and agreements come about, and what kinds of things can we focus on to form agreements around in the future? So how will we share joint revenue? What if the operators trade amongst each other? For example, what I just mentioned, if Marcellus is selling remnants to Matriarch Foods to turn into stews, how does that work? So that was kind of the inside of the building bucket. And then we looked at the outside of the building bucket, which is, how do we build a good business model for all? I think all of us who have been working in food systems are wary of infrastructural projects that try to take on the big bad market forces, right? So we want to make sure that we have something that is business first, that is profitable, that is stable. How do we make sure that we are coordinating farm supply in a way that's cost effective? Maybe there's whole crop purchasing behind that. How do we think about market pricing and distribution? How do we maximize the fact that these three operators will be co-located at one site and make sure that we're taking in all the economic advantages of that? And then again, how do we integrate with other food hubs after we prove out that initial proof of concept between the coastside food hub and this Yola processing center? And then here's a photo of the barn site, just so you can see it if you haven't before. So actually, as a side note, it looks like we will get some RFSI, some resilient food systems infrastructure funding to start retrofitting that barn site later this year. And then the plan is overall to engage in the phase 2 and phase 3 of the site construction plan, where new construction that will house the processing will be built in the coming years. All right, we can go next, Carly. So just a refresher on what's next. For later this year, August, September-ish, we'll have the business plan first draft complete based on that first convening and a ton of additional information that the operators have provided. We also just applied for a SARE grant that would support a supply chain analysis and allow us to keep engaging with Foodworks Group on additional studies to really prove out that business model. So cross your fingers for us that we get that. That would begin in the fall. And then, of course, the RFSI retrofit of the barn site will ideally begin around then as well. And then in October, we'll have our convening number 2 around supply. So we'll bring together farms and food hubs. So we're in the planning process for that right now. And then again, for 2025, in February, we'll have learning session number 2. So we'll share with you an update after that convening number 2 and the state of business planning, et cetera. Later in August next year, of course, we'll have all those other assessments around real estate, financing, and fundraising, convening 3 for institutional partners, and securing those institutional commitments. Again, North Star will happen in fall 2025 at the conclusion of the grant. So that's kind of like our overall status update. And I just wanted to share some photos too at the bottom here of some of the stakeholders that would be kind of impacted in a little cute mini case study too. So on the left here is Spreadwing Farm, who's one of the amazing farmers in Cape Valley Farm Shops network that is always seeking new sales, and just the type of farmer that would be really positively impacted by this project. Brisa Ranch, that's Vero from Brisa in the center there. She and her business partners, Cole and Cristobal, are the leaders of the Coastside Food Hub. That's a core partner of this project, and they're doing an amazing job standing up what their food hub looks like and being so thoughtful and intentional about making sure it makes sense business-wise. And then just this final picture is a snapshot of BIPOC broccolini from Coronel Produce out of Alba, part of a pilot that we were able to be a part of to set up a local BIPOC sourcing situation at UC Merced. So that's been going since fall of 2023. And it's been going so well that UC Merced is now writing local specific menus around farmers in Merced and Chowchilla, which is really cool. So just to show you that there are institutions that are engaging in whole and fresh sourcing And if we can crack this nut on pre-cuts and prefabs, we can really start to seize the assortment, right? We can start to really sell into much more of the institutional demand that's there. So hopefully you guys can all see how excited we are about this project. And we welcome your thoughts and questions, comments, concerns, etc. But thanks so much for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much, H, for simplifying that for us and bringing us through. I'm always smarter after talking to you. So really appreciate that. And I hope that sentiment is shared among our attendees. I wanted to, open the space now for any questions, comments, ideas. I know we know a lot of folks that are here in this attendee list. You're able to put a question in the chat or the Q&A if you'd like, or you can just raise your hand. There is a raise hand button and we can take you off mute if you have anything you want to ask or share with the group. So I'll just leave some space for that now. It is possible that H explained it so well that no one has any follow-up questions, which is totally fine. I'm going to give a little more time, just like in case someone's brewing something. Okay, we've got some raised hands. Okay, I'm going to start here with Sam, and I'm going to take you off mute. Go ahead, Sam.
Hello. Great presentation. I guess I think the question is ahead, but is the idea that the hub will buy all of these products and then sell them, and will, I guess it's because it's a similar idea to what we're trying to do on the protein side, right? So the question is like, how do you make sure that you don't get overwhelmed with inventory? Like you're creating the contract ahead with the institution so that you're only stocking and producing what you think you need to push out the other side, because that's obviously where the cash flow, it gets really hard with institutions. So I'm just wondering if there's any.
I would love to mind meld with you on how you guys have managed that over time, because you guys have had so much learnings about exactly that. So the idea is that we're going to try to start demand first and essentially build a really small set of SKUs. Like we're thinking like 5 to 8 that are just the heaviest hitters that are shared across multiple institutions. And then exactly try to get that contracted, MOU, LOI, whatever piece of paper we need to put behind it. But essentially like saying, okay, how many cut carrot coins, how many broccoli florets, how many diced potatoes, etc. will each institution that wants to participate sign up for, and then try to do that a season ahead so that folks are planting for it. So I keep joking, we're kind of doing a mini socialism, right? Because we have to do planned production around it, but that ensures if we go demand first, then plant, and then do whole or partial crop purchasing, and just do kind of planned production runs around that. That's kind of like the overall concept. So exactly what you were saying, just trying to manage cash flow as tight as possible that way.
Fantastic. Let us know when you get into protein.
Great, thank you, Sam. We've got a little lineup going here. So I'm gonna go next to Alicia, and then I see a question in the Q&A from Jocelyn, and then we'll go to Case after that. So Alicia.
Hi, great to see everybody and hear more about this project. Really exciting. I was curious if there's been conversations with other food hubs around Northern California and what you envision, like how far that web of food hubs would go. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, definitely. So Feed Sonoma has we've been keeping Dylan in the loop, kind of like on how this is going. He's very into the concept. Kind of one of the great conversations that kind of Dylan sparked in this network was just flagging, which I know this happens, Alicia, but like that there's kind of inefficient trade relationships between food hubs already. So Cape A obviously trades with Mendo Lake Food Hub. and several others. Tahoe Food Hub could always use more trading kind of coming down the mountain as well. Spork has also been kept apprised and invited to a lot of conversations too, because we know that they are so heavily into school districts that they suffer a bit in the summer during peak season when so many schools are out of session or ordering very low volumes for summer programs. So all of these kind of like food hub specific problems are informing our approach, which is like to basically say like, okay, how can we improve trading relationships between food hubs? We should probably fix or start new trade agreements between food hubs so that they're not having a double markup. So for instance, when Cape A sells to Feed, they're both putting their flat markup on top. So by the time it reaches Feed's final customer, it's got a 60% markup on it, right? So if we fix that in preparation for new pre-cuts, new prefabs coming into the supply chain, we set ourselves up well for success. And then we also, as we bring together all those other food hubs for convening number 2, that's kind of who's going to be invited. So we'll be inviting some key farmers, those food hub representatives, to really weigh in on the draft business plan and be like, how does this work for your ideal vision for the future of your business? And really get their candid, clear feedback on where we're going. So yeah, it's basically kind of been more informal conversations with various food hubs that are closer to like, of the major food hubs in Northern California. And then I would like to expand that conversation out further, say up to the Humboldt region, and any other food hubs that want to participate. We haven't thought too far about Southern California just yet, but I imagine that will come into play later if the logistics can make sense.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Let's
Right.
see. It looks like
Casey has a great question in the chat, it looks like.
yeah, and you know, Jocelyn asked a similar one in the Q&A section. So they're clearly on the same page. And it seems like they're pretty much the same. I'll read Jocelyn's and then, but I know you can see Casey's. How can those of us in larger organizations, i.e. counties, begin to educate our procurement departments about this concept so that we can begin to tackle procurement rules for engagement with this hub? Similarly to Casey's question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the way that I would answer it, I think just off the top of my head would be to think about, okay, what would really be a difference maker in terms of increasing our GFPP numbers, right? So in terms of pre-cut produce items, be like, what's high volume that's not, meeting any of the 5 value categories right now? What can we shift over to a project like this or to a vendor like this? Like, what is Daylight not providing us at this moment that's meeting those needs? And or if something is already kind of taking one or more of the value categories, what is something that would just make a huge difference for our guests and for our community? And what really says Bay Area, what would be ultra local and super fun to do? So it could be something that's like just super high volume, like apples, potatoes, onions, or it could be something a little bit more fun that's like a seasonal pre-cut that we could build a product line around. So what I would think would be most helpful is if you can get procurement teams to be willing to share purchasing data with us, we can actually support some of that analysis for you all. Supply Chain now has a data analyst working with us, so we're able to kind of crunch those numbers. We've been doing that for the entire UC system over the summer, which has been awesome just to like actually see what folks are purchasing and see how much overlap there is in the types of high volume things that are being purchased. So data transparency with us, if there's willingness to have us support some of that analysis, and then just being like this, like finding out like from your gut feeling and from a data perspective, what would be a huge GFPP needle mover if we were to shift it over to something like this, since it would meet, potentially 4 out of 5 value categories, everything but animal welfare. Exactly, let's build some demand. Exactly, Molly.
Here. Great questions, everyone. Really appreciating them and also the answers. That's a big piece, is building this demand. And again, let us know too how we can support you as you're doing that, work in your institutions. Any other questions? I don't see any, but let me make sure I'm not missing any. We may finish up early, which I'm okay with if nobody else has questions. I'm just going to give it another minute because last time I said that, then they all popped up. So. Okay. Well, maybe there are no more questions. Thank you for coming today. We have one closing slide, I believe, here. And if you have a question that comes up while I'm talking, just please drop it in the chat or raise your hand, because we really do want to hear from you. Just to give you a heads up about some of the things we talked about on the call and additional announcements, we'll be sharing after this a YOLO Food Network 2-pager that gives this overview of what H just shared, but just kind of breaks down the problem and describes the solution and the sort of vision that we're working towards with this project. So you can expect that in the follow-up email. And also look out for the next ARC RFSP public learning session later in the fall. We'll be excited to be announcing the date for that. And as we mentioned before, the slides and the recording will be circulated in a follow-up email. And we're so glad that you joined us and that you're part of this learning community. Thank you again so much to H for guiding us through all of this. And yeah, just being such a rock. So thank you all so much for joining today. We really look forward to continuing this work with you. And I hope that you have wonderful rest of your days.